I need your help.
I slammed the coat down on the wooden counter and demanded to know where the tailor was. The shop was dim, smelling of cedar and old thread. Bolts of fabric were stacked from floor to ceiling. A single candle burned low on the table. I had no time to wait. My mistress needed this coat altered before the Harrington ball, and I was already late. A man stepped out from behind the heavy curtain at the back. He was not what I expected. He wore no apron. His hands were clean. His posture was the kind that was not learned in a tailor's shop. It was the kind that was beaten into a person by years of title and blood and power. But I did not know that then. I thrust the coat toward him and said, "You are the tailor, yes? This needs to be altered by tonight." He looked at the coat. Then he looked at me. Something passed across his face that I could not name. He took the coat slowly, his fingers brushing mine for just a breath of a second. Then he walked to the door and locked it. I froze. My heart stopped thinking and started pounding. He turned around and the candlelight caught his face fully, and I finally saw what I had missed entirely. This man was no tailor, and that locked door was only the beginning of everything that was about to change my life forever. Now, tell me something. If you walked into that shop and handed your coat to a stranger, and he locked the door, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story already has your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss what comes next. I had never been inside Dalwick & Sons before that evening. The shop sat at the narrow end of Crestfield Lane, squeezed between a candlemaker and a bootblack's stall, the kind of place that people walked past without looking twice. My mistress, Lady Brousard, had sent me there in a hurry with her late husband's coat bundled under my arm and a list of instructions I had barely had time to read. "My name is Ottilie. I am a lady's maid, nothing more. I know my place the way I know the back of my hand. I do not ask questions that are not mine to ask. I do not look at people longer than is necessary. I do not cause trouble." But that evening, everything I knew about myself began to quietly fall apart. The bell above the door gave a dull ring when I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and warm, carrying the smell of pressed wool and candle wax. Bolts of fabric in deep, rich tones lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A half-finished waistcoat hung on a wooden frame near the window. Pins were scattered across the cutting table like dropped stars. No one was at the front counter. I waited. I cleared my throat. I set the coat on the counter and called out, asking if anyone was present. Nothing. I called again, louder this time. The heavy curtain at the back of the shop shifted. A man came through it. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. Tall in the way that filled a doorway and made a room feel smaller simply by entering it. He wore a plain white shirt, the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and dark trousers. No apron. No measuring tape draped around his neck. No tailor's chalk tucked behind his ear. But I was not paying close enough attention to any of that. I was in a hurry. Lady Brousard needed the coat altered at the shoulder and the hem taken up before the Harrington ball, which was in less than 4 hours. I did not have time to study the man's clothing, or the unusual stillness of his posture, or the way his gray eyes moved over me with a kind of careful, quiet attention that did not belong to a tradesman. I picked up the coat and held it out to him. "You are the tailor?" I said. "This needs to be altered before tonight. My mistress requires it by 7. He did not answer immediately. He looked at the coat in my hands. Then he looked at my face. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something I had no name for at the time. He stepped forward and took the coat from me. His fingers touched mine for less than a second. But I felt it. The warmth of his hand against my cold fingers. The steadiness of his grip. I pulled my hand back and looked away, telling myself the heat in my cheeks was from the warmth of the shop and nothing else. He turned the coat over slowly, examining the collar, the lining, the stitching along the cuff. He did this with great care, and I stood watching him, growing impatient. "Can it be done?" I asked. "Where is the alteration needed?" he said. His voice was low and even, controlled. The kind of voice that expected to be listened to without having to raise itself. "The shoulders are too wide," I said, "and the hem drags by an inch on the left side. My mistress is very particular." He nodded once. He turned and walked toward the back of the shop, the coat folded over his arm. And then he stopped at the door. He turned the lock. The sound of it was small, a single quiet click. But in that still shop, on that quiet lane, it struck me like a stone dropped into deep water. I stared at the locked door. Then I stared at him. "What are you doing?" I said. My voice came out smaller than I intended. He turned to face me. The candlelight from the table caught the line of his jaw, the sharp angle of his cheekbone, the composed and unreadable expression on his face. "I am ensuring we are not disturbed," he said. My heart was pounding. I was not a woman given to fear, but I was alone in a locked shop with a stranger, and something about him made me very aware that this was not an ordinary moment. "I do not know you," I said, standing straighter. "I came here for a simple errand. Unlock that door, and let us conduct our business properly." He set the coat down on the cutting table. He did not move to unlock the door. Instead, he pulled a stool from beneath the table and sat on it, resting his forearms on his knees, studying me with those steady gray eyes. "You came in very quickly," he said. "You did not read the sign on the door." I blinked. "What sign?" "The one that says Dalwick and Sons is closed for private business every Thursday after 5. I felt the heat rise in my face, this time not from the warmth of the shop. "Then why did you take the coat?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because you needed help." That answer was not what I expected. I did not know what to do with it. I stood very still, watching him, trying to understand what kind of man sat in a tailor's shop after hours, locked the door, and then offered kindness as an explanation. "Who are you?" I asked. He looked at the coat on the table. "Someone who knows how to alter a shoulder seam," he said. It was not a real answer. I knew it was not a real answer. But the clock on the wall behind him said 10 minutes past 5, and I had less than 2 hours, and so I let it go. For now. He stood and moved to the table, lifting the coat and spreading it flat under the light. He picked up a piece of tailor's chalk and marked the shoulders with quick, precise lines. He knew exactly what he was doing. His hands moved with confidence, but there was something in his movement that did not sit right with me. Something too deliberate, too refined. I watched him work. I watched the way he held himself. The way his back was straight even when he bent over the table. The way he did not fidget or shift his weight. The way his expression stayed completely composed even when he was focused on something small and detailed. Tailors I had met before were warm and chatty, full of opinions about thread weight and sleeve length. This man was silent and precise in a way that felt practiced. "You are very quiet for a tradesman," I said. He did not look up. "You are very bold for a lady's maid." My mouth opened and closed. I was not offended exactly, but I was startled. He had said it without malice, almost without expression, as though it were simply an observation. "How do you know I am a lady's maid?" I asked. He glanced up briefly. "The coat belongs to a man. You are a young woman delivering it alone at this hour. The household ring you wear on your right hand marks you as domestic staff." He looked back at the coat. It was not a difficult conclusion. I looked down at my right hand, the small brass ring that Lady Brousard gave all her household staff. I had stopped noticing it years ago. He had noticed it immediately. My unease deepened, not because I felt threatened, but because I felt seen, and I was not accustomed to that. We did not speak again for several minutes. He worked steadily, unpicking the shoulder seam with small, careful cuts, repositioning the fabric, pinning it with swift accuracy. He was good. I could see that. Whatever else he knew what he was doing with that coat. But my mind would not rest. I turned and looked at the locked door. "Will you not unlock it?" I said quietly. He paused. He set down the small scissors he was holding. He looked at me for a long moment. "Are you frightened?" he asked. "I am cautious," I said. Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than that. He stood and walked to the door and unlocked it. The click came again, softer this time, like a breath let out. He returned to the table without a word. I should have felt better. I did feel better. But I also felt something else. Something I was not prepared for. A strange, foolish disappointment that I could not explain and refused to examine. I stayed. I told myself it was because of the coat, because of the 4 hours and the Harrington ball and Lady Brousard's instructions. I told myself I was being sensible, but I stayed closer to the table than I needed to. And I watched him work with more attention than the task required, and when he finally looked up and found my eyes already on him, neither of us looked away immediately. That was the moment, though I did not know it yet, that everything began. He finished the shoulder seams in less than an hour. I had expected rough work done quickly, the kind of hasty alteration that would draw my mistress's sharp eye and earn me a reprimand. But when he held the coat up under the light and turned it slowly, I saw that the stitching was even and clean and finer than anything I had seen from the tailors on Marchfield Row. I stepped closer without thinking. "That is very good," I said, and I meant it. He looked at the coat, not at me. "It should fit correctly now." He handed it to me. I took it and examined the shoulder myself, running my thumb along the new seam. It was perfect, almost unnervingly so. I folded the coat carefully and wrapped it back in the brown cloth I had brought it in. Then I reached into the small purse at my wrist and began counting out coins for the work. He held up one hand. "I will not take payment," he said. I looked up sharply. "That is not how trade works." "No," he agreed. "It is not." I stared at him. He stared back. The candle on the table had burned lower while he worked, and the shop was dimmer now, warmer, the shadows thicker in the corners. "Then what do you want?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of a man thinking, the silence of a man who already knew his answer and was deciding whether to say it. "Your name," he said. I blinked. Of all the things I had expected, it was not that. "My name is worth nothing," I said. "Then it will cost you nothing to give it," he replied. I held the wrapped coat against my chest and looked at him for a long moment. The firelight was kind to his face, softening the sharpness of his features, but his eyes were still steady and direct, and far too knowing for a man standing in a tailor's shop at the end of Crestfield Lane. "Ottilie," I said at last. He repeated it, just once, quietly, as though testing the weight of it on his tongue. "And yours?" I asked, because it seemed only fair. He paused. Then he said, "Dorian." Just the one name. No family name offered. No title or trade attached to it. Just Dorian, plain and deliberate, the way a person gives a name when they are choosing to give as little as possible. I noted that. I filed it away in the quiet part of my mind, where I kept the things I did not yet understand. I thanked him for the work and moved to the door. "Ottilie." I stopped with my hand on the latch. His voice was not loud, but it reached me easily. I turned. He was still standing at the cutting table, one hand resting on the surface, watching me. "Be careful on Crestfield Lane after dark," he said. "It is not a street for a woman alone." I lifted my chin. I have walked darker streets than this. He did not argue. He simply nodded, and something in that nod felt less like agreement and more like a decision being made. I left the shop and walked quickly back toward Brousard House, the coat bundled under my arm, the evening cold sharp against my face. The streets were busy with carriages and evening foot traffic and the distant sound of a street musician somewhere near the square. I moved through all of it with my head down, focused on delivering the coat and reporting back to Lady Brousard before she sent someone to find me. But my mind was not on the street or the coat or my mistress. My mind was in that dim shop on Crestfield Lane, turning over everything that had happened with the careful, worried attention of a person who already suspects they have made a mistake, but cannot yet identify exactly what it was. Lady Brousard was pleased with the coat. She examined the seams with her spectacles on, and her critical gaze moving inch by inch over the alteration, and when she could find nothing to fault, she told me it was acceptable, and dismissed me with a wave of her hand. It was the closest she ever came to a compliment. I should have slept well that night. I did not sleep at all. 3 days passed. I kept to my duties. I dressed Lady Brousard in the mornings, arranged her correspondence, accompanied her to the dressmaker on Farrow Street, stood behind her chair at 2 separate afternoon teas, and said nothing about the shop on Crestfield Lane, or the man named Dorian, who had locked the door, and then unlocked it, and then refused to take payment for his work. On the 4th day, Lady Brousard called me to her writing room. She was seated at her desk with a letter in her hand, and her expression was the one she wore when something had displeased her, and she had not yet decided who to blame for it. "The coat," she said. My stomach tightened. "My lady? I wore it last evening to the Harrington ball." She set the letter down and looked at me over her spectacles. 3 separate people inquired about the quality of the alteration: Lord Thackett's wife, Mrs. Dunmore, and the Countess of Greville herself. I waited. "They want to know which tailor I used," she said. "Apparently the stitching was exceptional. I could not tell them because I do not know. You went to Dalwick and Sons. Was it old Dalwick who did the work?" I hesitated. "The man I spoke to gave his name as Dorian, my lady. He was the only one present." Lady Brousard's eyebrow rose. "Dorian? Not old Dalwick then? A new man?" "I am not certain," I said carefully. She studied me for a moment with that particular look she had, the one that stripped away everything unnecessary and looked at the plain fact underneath. Then she picked up her pen. "Go back," she said. "I want to commission a waistcoat for my nephew's birthday. Ask for the same man. And Ottilie." I paused at the door. "Find out his full name," she said. That was how I found myself back on Crestfield Lane on a Thursday afternoon, standing in front of the narrow door of Dalwick and Sons with Lady Brousard's commission in my hand, and a feeling in my chest that I could not honestly call reluctance. The bell above the door rang. The shop was much as I remembered it, except brighter, the afternoon light coming through the single front window and catching the dust motes floating above the cutting table. The half-finished waistcoat from before was gone, replaced by a length of dark wool spread flat and waiting. He was already at the back counter when I entered. He looked up. He saw me. And for just one moment, before his expression settled back into its usual composure, something moved across his face. Something swift and warm and immediately controlled. "Ottilie," he said. He said my name as though he had said it before, in some space I had not been present for. "My mistress wishes to commission a piece," I said, coming to the counter and laying out the instructions Lady Brousard had written for me. "A waistcoat, by the end of the month." He looked at the paper. He read it without picking it up, his eyes moving across it quickly. "Tell me about her nephew," he said. "His build, his coloring, his habits." I told him what I knew. He listened without interrupting, asking a precise question here and there. What did the nephew do with his evenings? Was he an active man or a sedentary one? Did he tend toward warmth or cold? These were not usual Tailor's questions. I answered them anyway. When I finished, he nodded and made 3 small notes on a piece of paper in a handwriting that was compact and exact. "It will be ready," he said. I gathered Lady Brousard's instructions and hesitated. "She asked me to inquire after your full name," I said. "For her records." He was quiet. The same deliberate quiet as before. "Tell her I am simply Dorian," he said. "Her records will not miss the rest," I looked at him directly. That is not an answer most people would accept. You are not most people, he said. It was not a compliment in any ordinary sense. It was a statement, offered quietly, with that same unreadable steadiness. But it moved through me in a way that no ordinary compliment ever had. I left the shop. On the way back, I passed a carriage I had not noticed before, parked at the far end of Crestfield Lane. It was large and black, with no family crest on the door, but the horses were magnificent, the kind that cost more than most households earned in a full year. A driver sat at the top, completely still, staring straight ahead. I looked at the carriage. I looked back at the tailor's shop, and a cold, slow feeling moved through me that had nothing to do with the wind on the lane. I walked faster, but I could not walk fast enough to leave the feeling behind. Something about the man named Dorian did not fit. It had not fit from the beginning, and the longer I told myself it did not matter, the louder that quiet knowing inside me became. He was not a tailor. I did not yet know what he was. But I was beginning to be very afraid that I was about to find out. I told myself I would not go back a third time. I told myself that twice while dressing Lady Brousard the next morning, once while arranging the flowers in the front parlor, and again while folding linens in the upstairs corridor. By evening, I had convinced myself completely. By Thursday, I was back on Crestfield Lane. I had a reason. A real one. Lady Brousard's nephew, young Master Aldous Brousard, had written to say he would be in the city by the weekend and wanted the waistcoat ready earlier than agreed. I had been sent to pass the message, and nothing else. It was an errand. A simple errand. I pushed open the door of Dalwick & Sons, and the bell rang, and Dorian looked up from the cutting table, and I felt that same swift, unwelcome thing move through my chest. The thing I had been spending 4 days pretending did not exist. But this time, he was not alone. A woman stood at the side counter, her back straight, her posture carrying the particular kind of authority that money and family name produce after several generations. She was handsome, perhaps 40 years of age, wearing a dark traveling coat and a small hat pinned at a careful angle. She was speaking to Dorian in a low, sharp voice. She stopped when I entered. They both looked at me. The woman's gaze was swift and dissecting. She took me in from head to toe in less than 2 seconds and dismissed me in one more. "Who is this?" she said. Not to me. To him. "A customer," Dorian said. His voice was completely even. "Lady Brousard's maid." The woman turned back to him. "We are not finished." "We are," he said. Something passed between them. A tension I could feel from across the room, old and tight and layered with history I was not part of. The woman picked up a pair of gloves from the counter, pulled them on with slow, deliberate movements, and walked toward the door. As she passed me, she stopped. She looked at me again, closer this time, with those sharp, assessing eyes. "Be careful, girl," she said softly. Just that. Then she walked out. The bell above the door rang behind her. I stood very still. Dorian turned back to the cutting table as though nothing had happened. "You have a message?" he said. I gathered myself. "Master Aldous Brousard will arrive this weekend. My mistress asks if the waistcoat can be ready by Saturday morning." "It can," he said. I did not move toward the door. "Who was that woman?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. His hands moved over the fabric on the table, straightening a fold that did not need straightening. "No one you need to concern yourself with," he said. "She told me to be careful," I said. "That concerns me somewhat." He looked up at me then, fully, the way he rarely did, with that complete, unguarded attention that made me feel as though the room had grown smaller. "Her name is Countess Verith," he said. "She is a woman who collects information and uses it when it suits her. She means nothing by the warning except to disturb you." "Why would she want to disturb me?" He said nothing. "Dorian," I said. He looked away, back to the fabric, back to the safe, manageable work of his hands. "Come back Saturday for the waistcoat," he said. "It will be ready." I left, but Countess Vereth's words followed me all the way back to Brousard House, cold and persistent as a draft under a door. Be careful, girl. Careful of what? Of him? Of the shop? Of myself? I did not sleep well again that night, or the night after. On Friday morning, I was in the market on Fenwich Square buying a ribbon for Lady Brousard when I saw the carriage again. The same black carriage from the end of Crestfield Lane. It was parked across from the market entrance, the horses still, the driver staring straight ahead as before. I stopped walking. I looked at it. The curtain on the carriage window moved. Someone inside was watching the square. I turned and walked quickly in the other direction, my heart moving faster than my feet. I told myself it was a coincidence. Carriages moved through the city. They parked. They waited. It meant nothing. But then I turned a corner onto a narrow side street, and I heard footsteps behind me, measured and unhurried, and I turned. And there was a man I had never seen before, standing at the corner, looking directly at me. He was broad-shouldered, plainly dressed, with the flat, expressionless face of someone paid to watch rather than think. He did not move toward me. He simply stood there and looked. I walked faster. I did not run. I did not want to run. Running meant I was frightened, and being frightened meant whoever was watching had already won something. I went back to Brousard House and went straight to the kitchen and sat down and pressed my cold hands together under the table and thought. The carriage had appeared first on Crestfield Lane, outside Dorian's shop. Now it had appeared outside the market while I was shopping. Countess Vereth had told me to be careful. None of these things made sense in a world where Dorian was simply a tailor on a narrow lane. That evening, Lady Brousard called me to her sitting room. She was reading a letter by the fire, and her face as she read it was very still in the way that meant she was controlling something strong beneath the surface. "Sit down, Ottilie," she said. I sat. She never asked me to sit. She folded the letter slowly. She looked at me with that same stripping attention she always carried. "Did anything unusual happen at the shop on Crestfield Lane?" she asked. I hesitated. "Unusual in what way, my lady?" "In any way," she said. I thought of the locked door, the refused payment. The woman was named Countess Vereth, the carriage on the lane. "The tailor is a private man," I said carefully. "He does excellent work." Lady Brousard was silent for a moment. She looked at the fire. "I received a letter today," she said. "From an old acquaintance. She tells me that Dalwick and Sons has been empty for 3 months. Old Dalwick retired in January. The shop has not been let to anyone new." The fire crackled. Outside the window, a carriage passed on the street. My mouth was dry. "Then who?" I said slowly. "Has been inside it?" Lady Brousard looked at me. Her eyes were sharp and kind at once in the way of a woman who had seen a great deal of the world and regretted very little of it. "That," she said quietly, "is precisely what worries me." "I went to the shop on Saturday. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking I was reckless. Perhaps I was, but I was also angry, and anger in a woman of my position is a rare and clarifying thing. I was tired of half-answers. I was tired of being looked at and warned and watched on street corners while being told nothing that made sense of any of it. I wanted the truth. I pushed open the door of Dalwick and Sons and the bell rang, and Dorian looked up from the table, and before he could speak I said, "The shop has been empty for 3 months. Old Dalwick has been gone since January, so I will ask you plainly, and I want a plain answer. Who are you?" He went very still. Not the stillness of a man caught out. The stillness of a man who had been waiting for something and had just heard it arrive. He set down the work in his hands. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he crossed to the door. My heart seized. He locked it. "Do not," I said sharply. "I am not locking you in," he said. "I am keeping others out. There is a difference." He turned to face me, and for the first time since I had walked into that shop 11 days ago, his expression was not composed. It was something else. something tired and honest and complicated. "Sit down, Ottilie," he said. "I would rather stand." He accepted that. He stayed near the door, arms at his sides, and he looked at me directly. "My name," he said, "is Dorian Ashcroft Valen. I am the Duke of Crestmoor." The words landed one by one, each one heavier than the last. Duke of Crestmoor. I knew that name. Every household in the city knew that name. The Duchy of Crestmoor was one of the oldest in the country. The Duke of Crestmoor sat in the Lords. He owned 4 estates, 2 of them working. He had been written about in the society papers twice in the past month alone, once for refusing a royal appointment, and once for a dispute over land in the northern counties that had become something of a public scandal. I had handed him a coat and called him a tailor. The blood left my face. "You let me speak to you like that," I said. My voice was barely steady. "You let me hand you that coat and order you to have it done by 7. "Yes," he said. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, then, because it was the first honest conversation I had experienced in 4 years. I stared at him. I did not know what to do with that. I did not know what to do with any of it. "Why are you here?" I said. "In this shop? In this lane? Why are you not at Crestmoor or in the Lords or wherever a duke is supposed to be?" His jaw tightened. He moved away from the door toward the cutting table and stood with his back half turned, looking at the dark wool still spread across the surface. "I am being watched," he said, "by people who want something from me that I will not give them. Using this shop allows me to move without being followed by my own household. People look for a duke in a duke's carriage, in a duke's coat, arriving at a duke's address. They do not look in a tailor's shop on a narrow lane." I thought of the black carriage, the man on the corner with the flat, expressionless face. "Countess Verith," I said. He turned and looked at me with something sharp in his expression. "How do you know that name?" "She was here," I said. "Last Thursday. She warned me to be careful." The composure came back, but harder now, with something cold underneath it. "What exactly did she say to you?" I told him. His face went very still while I spoke. "She knows you have been coming here," he said. It was not a question. "Apparently," I said. "And there is a black carriage that has been following me. One appeared outside this lane the first time I came. Another was parked at Fenwich Square on Friday morning when I was in the market. And there was a man watching me on the side street." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked, for one brief and startling moment, like fear. Not for himself. For me. "You were followed," he said. His voice was very low. "Yes." He turned abruptly and went to the back room through the heavy curtain. I heard movement. A drawer pulled open. The sound of paper. He came back with a folded document in his hand, and his face was now fully in the open in a way I had not seen before, stripped of everything, careful and controlled. "Countess Verith is not acting alone," he said. "She is working with a man named Lord Gretwick Fawn. He is on the Lord's Council. He has been trying for 2 years to force my hand on a land agreement in the north that would give him access to mineral rights worth more than most men earn in 10 lifetimes. I have refused 3 times. He has now moved to other methods." "Other methods?" I repeated. "Surveillance, pressure, finding something he can use against me." He looked at me steadily. "And now, apparently, he has found you." The air in the shop felt different, heavier. "I am nobody," I said. "I am a lady's maid. I have nothing he could possibly want." "You have been seen coming here repeatedly," Dorian said. "That is enough for a man like Gretwick Fawn. He will use you to reach me. He will threaten your position, your reputation. If necessary, he will threaten more." I thought about Lady Brousard and the letter she had received, the worried, careful way she had looked at me by the fire. "My mistress already suspects something," I said. "She was told the shop has been empty." He closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them, there was a decision in them. "You need to stop coming here," he said. The words hit me in a way I did not expect and was not prepared for. "I understand," I said quickly. "Of course. I was only here for errands. I have no reason to continue." "Ottilie," he said. I was already looking for the coat to take back to Lady Brousard, already reaching for something practical to do with my hands so the heat behind my eyes would not become anything visible or real. "Ottilie, look at me." I looked at him. His expression was not composed. It was not the face of the Duke of Crestmoor. It was the face of Dorian, the man who had taken a coat from my hands and refused payment and asked for my name instead. "I am asking you to stay away," he said, "because I am afraid for you. Not because I want you gone." That was worse than everything else he had said. Because I believed him. He handed me the finished waistcoat, wrapped carefully, the stitching along the pocket flawless and fine. He walked with me to the door and unlocked it and stood back. I stepped out onto Crestfield Lane. The cold air hit my face and I walked without looking back, but I felt him standing in the doorway, watching me go. The same way I had felt him watching me the very first evening I had stumbled into his shop with a coat and a list, and not the faintest idea of the world I was walking into. I turned the corner, and came face to face with Countess Verith. She was standing directly in my path, her gloves on, her hat pinned, her smile the kind that had no warmth in it at all. "Miss Ottilie," she said pleasantly, "what a very interesting Thursday you are having." Behind her, at the end of the lane, the black carriage was waiting. I did not step back. That was the first thing I decided in the half-second between seeing her face and finding my voice. I would not step back. I would not give Countess Verith the satisfaction of watching me shrink. "Countess," I said, keeping my voice level. "I did not expect to see you here." "I imagine not," she said. She tilted her head slightly, studying me the way a person studies something they are considering purchasing. "You have been spending a great deal of time on this lane, Miss Ottilie, for a lady's maid on simple errands." "My mistress has a commission with the shop," I said. "I collected it today. The work is finished." I held up the wrapped waistcoat as evidence. She glanced at it without interest. "Yes, the waistcoat." She smiled again. "And the coat before that, and the visits in between. You are very dedicated to your mistress's tailoring requirements." Two men appeared at the mouth of the lane behind her. Not close enough to seem threatening, close enough to be a statement. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face still. "Is there something you want from me, Countess?" I said. She clasped her hands together in front of her. "I want to offer you something actually, a kindness." She paused for effect. "Walk away from this lane, walk away from that shop and the man inside it. Find yourself another errand, another tailor, and forget that any of this happened. If you do that, I will ensure that your position in Lady Brousard's household remains entirely secure." The cold moved through me, slow and deliberate. "And if I do not?" I said. Her smile did not change. "Lady Brousard is an old woman with a great deal of social standing and a great deal to lose. It would be a shame if questions were raised about the conduct of her household. About a certain young maid making repeated, unexplained visits to a shop with no legitimate trade owner. She let that settle. Scandal has a way of spreading, Miss Ottilie, even to people who do not deserve it. She was threatening my mistress. She was using Lady Brousard, who had done nothing, who knew nothing, who had only received a coat back with exceptional stitching and been pleased by it. Rage moved through me like a flame touching dry wood. But I was not stupid. I was standing in a lane with two men behind her and a black carriage at the end of the street. And I was a lady's maid with a wrapped waistcoat under my arm, and rage, however righteous, was not a useful tool in this particular moment. "I understand you," I said quietly. "Good afternoon, Countess." I walked past her. She let me. That was almost worse than if she had stopped me, because it meant she was confident. She had said what she came to say, and she believed it had worked, and she did not need to do anything more. I walked back to Brousard House with my head up and my hands steady and the rage burning clean and quiet in my chest. Lady Brousard was in her sitting room when I arrived. I gave her the waistcoat. She inspected it in her usual thorough way and set it aside. Then she looked at me. "Sit down," she said again. I sat. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out." So I did. I told her about the first evening, the locked door, Dorian, the refused payment, the name he gave, the carriage on the lane, Countess Verith in the shop, the man watching me on the side street at Fenwich Square. And then, everything he had told me about himself, about Lord Gretwick Fawn, about the land dispute, about the mineral rights and the pressure and the surveillance. And finally, what had just happened outside on Crestfield Lane. Lady Brousard listened to all of it without a single interruption, which was itself a remarkable thing, because she was not by nature a patient woman. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "The Duke of Crestmoor," she said at last. "Yes, my lady." She stood and went to the window and looked out at the street with her hands clasped behind her back. "I knew his mother," she said, "a long time ago, before she passed. She was a remarkable woman." She was quiet for another moment. "He refused the Northern Land Agreement?" "3 times, I said. She turned from the window. Her expression was the most serious I had ever seen. "Lord Gretwick Fawn is not a man to be managed lightly," she said. "He has ruined 3 families in the past decade, quietly, completely, the kind of ruin that leaves no fingerprints." She looked at me steadily. "And he has now decided that you are the thread he can pull to unravel something." "I am nobody," I said. It was what I had said to Dorian. It still felt true. "You are someone the Duke of Crestmoor allowed into his confidence," Lady Brousard said, "which makes you, in Lord Fawn's eyes, extremely useful." She moved to her writing desk and sat down and pulled a piece of paper toward her. "I am going to write a letter," she said. "You will not ask me to whom." I did not ask. She wrote for several minutes, sealed the letter, and held it out to me. "Deliver this tonight," she said. "The address is on the front. Go on foot. Do not take the household carriage. Tell no one where you are going. And Ottilie." I looked at her. "Be back before 9, she said. Her voice was firm, but underneath it was something that sounded, from a woman like Lady Brousard, very much like worry. The address on the letter was on Merivale Square. A tall, stone-fronted house with a black door and polished steps, and a brass knocker in the shape of a griffin. I had never been to Merivale Square. It was the kind of address that reminded a person like me very clearly of the distance between one life and another. I knocked. A butler answered. He looked at me, at the letter, and then back at me. "Wait here," he said. I waited on the steps in the cold for 4 minutes. Then the butler returned and told me to come inside, and I stepped into a hallway that was larger than Lady Brousard's entire ground floor. He led me to a study. Dorian was standing by the fireplace. He turned when I entered, and for a moment neither of us spoke. He was not in a plain white shirt now. He wore a dark coat, well cut and perfectly fitted, and there was nothing about him that could be mistaken for a tradesman. He was entirely and unmistakably what he was, the Duke of Crestmoor, standing in his own house, and the distance between us was suddenly very loud. "Lady Brousard sent you," he said. "She sent a letter," I said, holding it out. He crossed the room and took it from me. His hand did not touch mine this time. The distance was careful and deliberate on both sides. He broke the seal and read. His expression changed as he read, something tightening around his eyes and jaw. He looked up. "She knows about Fawn," he said. "She knew his name," I said. "She said he has ruined 3 families." Dorian set the letter on his desk. He turned and looked at the fire for a long moment. "Countess Verith spoke to you on the lane," he said. "I saw from the window." I looked up sharply. "You were watching?" "I was concerned," he said. "I could not come out. It would have made things considerably worse for you." He paused. "What did she say?" I told him. All of it. The threat about Lady Brousard. The suggestion of scandal. The two men standing behind her like punctuation at the end of a sentence. When I finished, his jaw was set, and his eyes were hard. "She has moved faster than I anticipated," he said, more to himself than to me. "What does Lord Fawn want from you exactly?" I asked. "Not the simple version, the real one." He looked at me for a moment, weighing something. Then he told me. The land in the northern counties sat above a seam of coal and iron ore that surveyors had quietly valued at an extraordinary sum. Fawn had spent years acquiring the surrounding land piece by piece. The Crestmoor holding was the last piece. Without it, his access to the ore was blocked entirely. He had come to Dorian first with an offer, then with a higher offer, then with legal challenges that had gone nowhere. And now with Countess Verith and black carriages and men on street corners, and a lady's maid used as an unwilling weapon. "He will not get it," Dorian said. The words were simple and completely final. "What will you do?" I asked. He looked at Lady Brousard's letter again. "Your mistress has offered something I did not expect," he said. He looked up at me. "She has contacts in the Lord's Council. Old ones, from her late husband's time. She is offering to use them." I stared at him. "Lady Brousard?" "She was not always simply a mistress with a sitting room and a sharp eye for stitching," he said, and something almost like warmth moved into his expression. "It appears she was once a great deal more than that." I thought of her writing the letter without telling me to whom. Going on foot. Be back before 9. Lady Brousard, who had known his mother, who had listened to everything I told her without a single interruption, who had acted within minutes. I felt suddenly and unexpectedly that I had been underestimating the people around me from the very beginning of this entire affair. 3 days after I delivered that letter, Lord Gretwick Fawn made his move. It was not subtle. Men like Fawn did not do subtle when subtle had already failed them. He sent a formal complaint to the household registry, citing irregular conduct by a domestic employee of Lady Brousard, specifically, repeated unsupervised visits to an unlicensed premises. It was the kind of complaint that sounded minor and procedural and was designed to quietly destroy a reputation before anyone had time to defend it. Lady Brousard read the complaint at her breakfast table, folded it precisely in half, and handed it to her solicitor, Master Pell Quincy, who had been sitting in her front parlor for 20 minutes already, as though he had expected it. I learned later that she had expected it. She had expected it because Dorian had warned her, and she had warned Quincy, and Quincy had prepared a counter-response that was filed with the registry the same morning Fawn's complaint arrived. The complaint dissolved without producing a single consequence. Fawn tried again. This time he sent Countess Verith to Lady Brousard directly, arriving at Brousard House with a social call that was not a social call, carrying pleasantries that were not pleasantries, and making quiet suggestions about the wisdom of a widow of good standing involving herself in matters that were not her concern. Lady Brousard offered her tea. She listened to everything. She agreed with several things that she had no intention of agreeing with. And then she showed Countess Verith to the door with perfect warmth and a smile that contained nothing behind it at all. Verith left. I was watching from the upstairs corridor. "She is remarkable," said a voice behind me. I spun around. Dorian was standing in the hallway, in Brousard House, in plain daylight. I pressed one hand to my chest. "How did you get in here?" "The kitchen door," he said. "Your cook is very accommodating." I stared at him. "You came through the kitchen." "I have come through less dignified entrances," he said, and there was something in his expression that was as close to amusement as I had ever seen it. But behind the amusement was something else, something alert and serious. "Fawn has called in a debt," he said, lowering his voice. "A man named Russell Tabb. He is a records keeper in the city registry. Fawn owns a considerable amount of Tabb's debt, and he has now called it in, asking Tabb to alter the land survey documentation. If the survey records are changed, the legal standing of my ownership in the northern counties becomes contestable." I understood immediately. He is going to take the land through falsified documents. He is going to try, Dorian said. Can you stop it? Only if I can reach Tab before Fawn does. He paused. I need to move tonight, but there is a problem. I waited. Fawn has placed 3 men outside my house on Merivale Square, he said. He knows I am aware of what he is doing. He wants to prevent me from reaching Tab tonight, which means keeping me inside long enough for the documents to be altered by morning. Then you cannot leave through your own door, I said. No, he said. Which is why I am standing in your hallway. I understood. You need to leave from here. If I leave from Brousard House, he said, they will not expect it. They are watching Merivale Square. They are not watching this street. I nodded slowly. And Tab. Where is he? Fenwick Registry on Aldmore Street, he said. 20 minutes on foot. I thought for a moment. Then I said, I will come with you. He looked at me with that sharp, direct attention. No, he said. Listen to me, I said. 2 people walking together on an evening street are invisible. 1 man walking alone draws attention, especially a man who looks like you. I met his gaze steadily. I have walked every street in this part of the city 100 times. I know them better than you do. And I am, as you once pointed out, very bold for a lady's maid. Something moved through his expression, complicated and warm and quickly contained. Lady Brousard will not approve, he said. Lady Brousard, said Lady Brousard's voice from the bottom of the stairs, is standing right here. We both turned. She was at the foot of the staircase, perfectly composed, her hands folded in front of her. Go, she said to me, both of you. Be careful. And Ottilie. She looked at me with those kind, stripping eyes. Come back. We left through the kitchen door. The streets were busy with evening traffic, carriages and foot passengers, and the noise of the city going about its business without any awareness of what moved through it. We walked at a steady pace, close enough to appear together, far enough apart to be respectable. I did not look at Dorian, and he did not look at me, but I was aware of him beside me with every step, the steadiness of his stride, the quiet way he moved through a crowd. We turned onto Aldmore Street. Fenwick Registry was a square gray building with 3 steps up to the door and a lamp burning above the entrance. The door was still open. The registry kept long hours. Dorian went in first. I waited on the steps, watching the street. A minute passed. 2 minutes. 3. A carriage turned onto the far end of Aldmore Street. Black. No crest on the door. My heart tightened. I pushed inside. The registry entrance hall was narrow, with a long desk and shelves of bound volumes behind it. Dorian was at the far end of the desk, speaking quietly to a small, pale man with ink-stained fingers and the expression of a person in the middle of a terrible decision. Russell Tab. Tab's hands were shaking slightly. He was looking at something Dorian had placed on the desk in front of him. I came to Dorian's side and spoke quietly in his ear. Black carriage, end of the street. He did not turn around. How far? 2 minutes. Perhaps less. He looked at Tab. He said, very calmly, You have worked in this registry for 19 years. You have a good record and a family depending on you. Whatever Fawn has told you he will do if you refuse, I am telling you plainly what I will do if you do not. I will protect your debt entirely. You will owe nothing. Your family will not be touched. But the moment those documents are altered, there is nothing I or anyone else can do for you, because what Fawn is asking of you is a criminal act, and you will carry the consequence of it alone. Tab looked at the desk. His jaw worked. His ink-stained hands pressed flat against the surface. Then he looked up and said, The documents have not been altered. Are they safe? Dorian said. They are locked in the second vault, Tab said. Only I have the key. Keep them there, Dorian said. Tonight and every night after. If Fawn sends anyone, you come to this address directly. He placed a small card on the desk. Day or night. Tab took the card with shaking hands and nodded. We left through a side door. The black carriage had reached the front of the building. We were already on the parallel street behind it, walking steadily away. Neither of us spoke for a full minute. Then I said, "That was close." "Yes," he said. We walked on. The city moved around us. Somewhere near the square, a church bell rang 8 times. "He will try again," I said. "Fawn always tries again," Dorian said. "But the documents are safe, and Tab is now protected, and Fawn has lost his only remaining quiet option. From this point, anything he does will be visible. Men like Fawn do not survive visibility." I thought about that, about the long, careful machinery of power and the people crushed quietly beneath it, and the people who refused to be crushed. We turned back toward Brousard House. At the corner of Crestfield Lane, Dorian stopped. I stopped beside him. The lane was empty and quiet, the narrow shop at the far end dark now. No candle burning in the window. Just an ordinary shopfront on an ordinary lane. He looked at it for a moment. "I never intended any of this," he said quietly. "When you walked in that first evening, I was simply trying to stay out of sight for an hour, and then you handed me the coat." I looked at the dark shop. "You locked the door," I said. "I know," he said. "You should not have locked the door," I said. "No," he agreed. "I should not have." He was quiet for a moment. "But I find I cannot make myself sorry for it." I looked at him. He was looking at the lane, his profile steady in the lamplight, and I thought about all the things that had happened in the 11 days since I had pushed open that door with a coat and a hurry, and no idea at all of what was waiting on the other side of it. I thought about locked doors and refused payments and names offered in exchange for names, about Countess Verith and black carriages and Lady Brousard writing a letter at her desk without explaining why, about Russell Tabb's shaking hands and the documents in the second vault and the careful, slow machinery of a powerful man trying to break another powerful man and failing, and about Dorian, standing in a tailor's shop, still and composed, with his sleeves rolled to the elbow and chalk dust on the cutting table, and gray eyes that saw everything they looked at. I could not make myself sorry either. "What happens now?" I asked. He turned and looked at me, fully, the way he did so, rarely and so completely. "Fawn's position in the council is no longer secure," he said. "Lady Brousard's contacts have already begun asking questions in the right places. Quietly. The way that actually works." He paused. "It will take time, but the ground has shifted." "And the shop?" I said. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved in his expression. "I will not be returning to it," he said. "There is no longer any reason to hide in lanes." I nodded. "No," I said. "There is not." The lamplight between us was quiet and steady. "Lady Brousard," he said carefully, "has suggested that if her household were to require any future commissions of exceptional tailoring, the proper address is Merivale Square." I looked at him. "She said that?" "In the letter," he said. "In the final paragraph." I thought of Lady Brousard at her writing desk, writing for several minutes, sealing the letter, handing it to me. The remarkable woman who had known his mother, who had acted within minutes, who had said go and come back, and stood at the foot of her stairs as though she had arranged all of it from the very beginning, which perhaps she had. "Then I suppose," I said slowly, "that my mistress may have future errands for Merivale Square." "I suppose she may," Dorian said. He looked at me for one long, still moment. The kind of moment that held more than either person in it was yet ready to say aloud. The kind that did not need to be said yet, because it was already there, already certain, already quietly decided. He inclined his head. "Good night, Ottilie." "Good night," I said. I walked back to Brousard House. Lady Brousard was in her sitting room, the fire burning low, a book open in her lap that she was not reading. She looked up when I came in. "Well?" she said. "The documents are safe," I said. "Tab is protected. Fawn has no more quiet options." She nodded once, slowly, with the satisfied expression of a woman whose calculations have come out correctly. "And the Duke?" she said. I looked at the fire. "He will not be returning to the shop," I said. "No," she said. "I did not imagine he would." She paused. "But Merivale Square is not far." I looked at her. She had already returned her attention to the book that she was not reading, her expression composed and entirely innocent. I went upstairs. I stood at my small window and looked out at the dark city, the rooftops and the lamplight and the distant carriages moving through streets. I had walked 100 times without ever imagining that one evening I would push open a door on a narrow lane and hand a coat to a stranger and have everything that followed change the shape of my life completely. A locked door, a refused payment, a name given for a name. A duke in a tailor's shop who had not wanted to be found, and a lady's maid who had not been looking, and the quiet, stubborn, impossible thing that had grown between them in the lamplight of a cedar-smelling shop while a candle burned low and the city went about its business outside. I did not know yet what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of it. And somewhere on Merivale Square, I was certain, neither was he.